What if the Epstein case was not an exception? What if it was a glimpse, brief, ugly, incomplete, into a level of society most people will never enter, where access, status, and influence can bend the speed and shape of consequences? By the end of this video, you will understand why this case left so many people with the same feeling. There is a protected world above ordinary consequence, and they are not part of it. What this video is really about. This video is about the divide. Not envy, not fantasy. Structure. The sense that some circles operate with a level of insulation ordinary people do not have, and that cases like Epstein expose that insulation in the worst possible way. That is the real angle. Not simply that wealth creates privilege. Most people already know that. It is that extreme access may also distort scrutiny, delay accountability, and create a social world where danger remains survivable far longer than it should. The visible world. On the surface, the Epstein case looked like a scandal involving a wealthy, connected man and a network of elite associations. That alone was enough to draw public attention. But what made the story linger was not only the abuse allegations, it was the atmosphere around them. The names, the connections, the sense of a world behind the visible world. A world of invitation-only access, social insulation, and people who appear to move through consequence differently. That perception may not explain every detail of the case, but it does help explain why the case landed with such force. Because many people were not reacting only to Epstein, they were reacting to the possibility that the rules are not merely uneven. They may be structurally different at the top. The hidden advantage. This is where the case becomes socially explosive. Most people live close to consequence. A bad decision can cost them work, reputation, income, stability. But elite circles often appear buffered by money, lawyers, networks, and institutional familiarity. That does not mean the powerful are untouchable. It does mean they may have more layers between action and consequence. More people willing to defend them, more time to reposition, more room to negotiate outcomes that ordinary people could never access. That is the hidden advantage, not immunity in the absolute sense. Something more practical than that. Distance, delay, insulation, a softer landing when consequences begin to fall. Here is what matters so far. The public outrage around Epstein was not only about one man's alleged crimes, it was about what the case seemed to reveal. That there are levels of protection in society most people will never see until something breaks open in public. And once people see that, trust does not recover easily, because the issue is no longer just crime, it is hierarchy. The final pattern. So what does this reveal about the wider system? It reveals that inequality is not only economic, it can become moral and legal in practice. Not always in written law, but in lived experience, in who gets time, who gets doubt, who gets careful handling, who gets buried immediately beneath the full force of consequence. That is the darker meaning. The Epstein case unsettled people because it appeared to confirm an old suspicion, that there are protected worlds inside society. Worlds that present themselves as civilized, philanthropic, cultured, important, while operating with a level of insulation ordinary people are never offered. And when those worlds crack open, the public does not just see scandal. It sees class power, it sees social immunity, it sees a structure that was never built for them. Verdict. The clearest conclusion is this: the Epstein case mattered so deeply because it suggested that some people do not merely have more wealth. They may also have more protection, more delay, more social forgiveness, and more institutional cushioning than ordinary people can easily imagine. That does not mean every elite space is criminal. It does mean every unanswered question should be filled with speculation. But it does mean the public instinct behind this case was not irrational. People sensed a divide, and they were right to question it. That is what should remain after the headlines fade. Not just outrage at one man, but suspicion toward the world that made him possible. So here is the question. If some people live with layers of protection the public never sees, what else only becomes visible after the damage is done? If you are watching The Unveiled Darkness, subscribe. Next, move into the wider series on power, belief, control, and institutional darkness. Because this machinery did not begin with Epstein, and it did not end with him.